When people ask, how did you know you were trans? They often expect a definitive memory, a defining moment or string of moments buried in childhood. Was I different? Did I gravitate towards the wrong toys or the wrong colours? But I think these questions miss the point. Every child has their preferences and aversions, each shaped by unique experiences. But preferences aren't indicators of gender. Our identities aren't tied to toys or colours. They're deeper, evolving truths, shaped over experiences. My awareness of my transgender first surfaced when I was around 14 or 15, driven by my feelings for a girl that I fell for at my school. This new emotion was complicated by a discomfort within my own body, a feeling that transcended ordinary self-consciousness. It wasn't mere discomfort, it was a sense of disconnect, of existing just slightly apart from myself. It's in looking back that I begin to understand the depth of this difference, each memory clarifying my truth self, but also uncovering the truth of how I became to dismiss that aspect of me that wanted something more. When I was a kid, puberty arrived quite early for me, I think for most people. I was around 8 or 9 and I started noticing my body changing, each change pulling me further from who I felt I was around other people. A classmate pointed it out to me. I felt an incredible, intense discomfort that I had to start wearing bras, and I had these 2 lumps on my chest that weren't there before. But I wasn't uncomfortable because of the comment or because someone was looking at my body. I was not personally shy at that age, but because I wanted nothing to do with the puberty that had happened to me. I didn't want to grow into a woman, even though I admired the women that were around me. And I admired the femininity that was in many things. I enjoyed femininity in so many ways. I wanted the same future that all women and men can have, with loving relationships, family, and dreams, wearing a beautiful dress to a party. But to become a woman in body and identity even, I was completely averse to this. When my body grew, I rejected it and instinctively resisted the idea of becoming what others expected of me. I grew up in quite a religious, misogynistic household. Defying the rules was absolutely met with consequences. For me, physical consequences as well as emotional consequences. But despite that, I pushed back every single time. In fact, it almost fueled the anger that made me driven to pursue this righteousness that I felt about myself, about the world being unjust towards people who were different. I was labelled a tomboy for loving rugby, wrestling, football, trying to play with action figures, all that sort of stuff. Any activities that weren't seen as feminine were a struggle for me to try to engage with. I didn't have the words to describe what I felt and how I felt back then. Only I didn't want the role that was being assigned to me. Society, people, individuals, institutions constantly reminded me of those expectations, from the way I was supposed to dress to the unsettling way that some adults used to look at me, as if I was like a puppet or a pet, dressed in a cute little outfit and paraded to fit someone else's image. There's a common misconception that trauma causes people to be trans. Trauma shapes us as individuals and even as a collective, absolutely, but it doesn't define what gender means. It doesn't define our own personal gender. Childhood difficulties can affect a lot of people, but they don't drive a person to change their gender. My identity was separate from my trauma. Choosing to transition isn't a reaction to trauma. It's a journey towards self-acceptance, an intentional step towards the future. The first time I voiced my feelings, I was with my girlfriend in high school. I feel like I'm a boy, I said to her, though I wasn't entirely sure what I meant at that time. I didn't even know what transgender was then. This was in the early 2010s, and I was piecing it together slowly, even though there were places out there for trans folks. She was supportive, but I think a little bit confused. And so was I, to be honest. For a while I thought maybe it was something temporary or something that I imagined, and I kept putting myself down and telling myself that I was making it all up. But the feeling stayed, and it just grew, and I couldn't ignore it any longer. When we had one of these open days that they have at college or sixth form in the UK, I decided to cosplay as someone from the Mortal Instruments. Simon. I don't know if you've ever read them, or I think there's a TV series even. But I decided that I was going to cosplay this incredibly low-key, normal-looking human character in flannel and fake glasses, and I cut my hair, and I just pretended that my name was Simon. It felt like a light-hearted way to explore my identity without any real consequences, because the people that were around me weren't the people from my school, from my family, in general in my peer group. So it really was quite a nice little experiment for me at the time to see what was going on, and I realised that I really enjoyed it. It was very liberating in so many ways. I felt comfortable around these people for the first time in God knows how long. Well, after that, during college, during sixth form, I kept on trying to embrace this new masculinity that I had, and I did at some point learn that transgender was a thing. I think it was from someone in my cosplay group, actually. And I'm really grateful to them for having this awkward conversation with me, I think, because neither of us really understood what each other were talking about. And anyway, one of the people that I met at college became instantly my source of support, because during this time most of the time I spent my time alone. I couldn't afford a lot of the things that I needed to exist on a day-to-day basis for all sorts of reasons, and I actually started calling him my sugar daddy, which I don't know whether he knew, but he was absolutely amazing and just a pillar, a figure, the absolute definition of what it means to be a good community for people who are in need of that support. Early on in this period, I went to my GP and told them that I think I'm transgender and I need a referral to GIC. At the same time, we discussed my mental health, and I was saying, yeah, I feel awful, and I'm not feeling good. I thought that this would help with my application, of course, saying that I'm dysphoric and depressed most of the time. I was self-harming as well, and he asked to see my self-harm scars, and I showed him, and he winced very visibly, and he referred me immediately to the childhood and adolescent mental health services. They deemed me not in crisis, and I was about 17, living on my own, desperate for help in so many ways. Not only did I not get any help, but the letter, as it turned out a few years later, didn't even go to the GIC. Apart from the fact that these services aren't great for anyone, I suppose, I'd just become really, really good at pretending that everything was fine, because it was the only way to survive as a child who was transgender, who had experienced trauma. And unfortunately, I think that's similar for a lot of trans people, is when you grow up without the words to describe your identity or the situation to be completely and utterly yourself, you become quite skilled at hiding it, and sometimes that means that you don't even realize that you're hiding it. Even as an adult, I'm still unlearning that. I'm 26, and I've spent the last 6 years learning things that I should have known all along, like feeling valid in my sadness when I'm misgendered, or when my name is disrespected, or when someone says something transphobic. And I've struggled even to feel sad. In fact, sometimes I just laugh. A trauma response, I think, that I'm working to take more seriously, because hiding my true emotions no longer serves me. And it never really did, apart from in those moments where speaking out about an injustice would result in being hurt, either emotionally, physically, in that way that adults tend to isolate children who speak out. In a cis-normative culture, understanding oneself becomes a struggle. People don't realize how much they're repressing a lot of the time. For me, the struggle is beyond everyday issues. It's a fundamental disconnect from my body and my identity. Fundraising for my top surgery, for example, represents more than just a medical step. It's the possibility of long-term relief, a chance to be truly comfortable in my own skin, and yet I struggle to relate myself to that, despite knowing that it will be a good thing for me. I don't connect with my body, and I am in that situation, not just because my needs have been disrespected, disregarded for such a long time in my life, but also because these medical situations are really difficult to achieve, and unless you have the money lying around somewhere, it's going to be years for you to be able to achieve any kind of joy in medical transition. In so many ways, you have to disconnect yourself from your body, and that just means that it's harder every single time that you get disrespected, either emotionally, physically. It's harder for you to stand up for yourself, to relate to the person that you are, because you're constantly told that you should erase that person. Trans people often feel pressured to be acceptable for cis society. As Alok Menon has noted, it's as though we're allowed only a conditional type of existence. We're only allowed to exist in a conditional way. This pressure manifests in so many different ways, from parents dismissing identity to adults ignoring a person's choices. When I came out to my mother at 17, she dismissed it as a phase, and it's been years for her to even make tiny little steps in understanding who I am and accepting and respecting that. In a similar fashion, governmental institutions, even though I have used Mr. on my passport and I have male on my passport for almost 8 years now, they still send me letters with Miss and female, and I still have these issues talking to medical practitioners and so on and so forth. Institutional transphobia completely plays a role in a person's ability to accept themselves. This was why when I was 20, I briefly started testosterone, but felt completely and utterly overwhelmed by anxiety. My family and societal messages about transitioning weighed really heavily on my mind all the time. It's taken me 6 years to realise that my views are as valid as theirs, if not more so. It's my body, and today I still navigate these layers of doubt, learning to separate my truths from other people's expectations. And now, even though I can't say that I feel completely at ease, I understand where my insecurities come from and how to manage them. I look in a mirror and see a body that doesn't quite feel like mine, but I don't need to justify that. The only reason that it took me so long to get to this point is the intolerance of others, their inability to sit there and listen, to provide the emotional support, the lack of awareness of trans issues, of existing as a trans person, the misinformation that is spread by individuals, celebrities in the media, and sometimes even the government. The idea that a person assigned female at birth can only be trans because they have experienced some trauma and they are wrong about being trans because of that. The idea that getting cosmetic surgeries for personal happiness reasons is somehow harmful and invalid, and the fact that trying to discover yourself as a person when you have experienced an adverse childhood becomes all the more complicated and somehow at the same time disrespected because of the white knighting tendencies of a few vocal and violent. It will always be of vital importance that you see the very serious and complicated reasons that you might be struggling, to understand why things impact you in the way that they have done, to understand why you might think the way that you do, why you might feel the way that you do, is in some ways a powerful tool in making sure that it doesn't happen to you, doesn't happen to other people, and that we can remove these areas from society, that we can create safe spaces, even if it's just for ourselves, even if it's for a massive group of people, and so that we can teach each other how to find happiness, how to find comfort, and who to listen to, who not to listen to, and where to focus their energies.